Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw L from the massively popular manga and anime series Death Note. Now, some of you may remember I did an L video before, but that was a chibi version. It was almost 2 years ago that I did that one, and ever since then people have been saying, Mark, can you show us how to draw the real L? And, your wish is my command. Here at youtube.com/Mark Crowley. We aim to please, and so I've come back to do a drawing, how to draw L as he appeared in the manga and the anime series. Now what we have here is a perfect square, as I like to do with these videos, and the dimensions, 5.5 inches on all sides. That works out to almost exactly 14 centimeters. How about that? And you just cross down the middle to divide it into 4 squares, and that'll help you for placing these lines. Let's go ahead and begin with the basic guidelines for the head. Alright, so here you have the shape of the head, fairly close to real human anatomy in terms of the shape, and we have lines coming across here that are going to help me place the eyes later on. Notice that if you take both of these lines and look at them in relation to the top of the head and the chin, just a little closer to the chin, very common in manga anime style illustrations to do that, shifting the facial features down just a bit. And then I got a curving vertical line here which will later help us place the nose and the mouth. But for now I want to go ahead and draw the guidelines for the rest of the body. Let's begin by getting a line in for the shoulders. So you see I've put in a line here for the shoulders. He's going to be in the sort of classic hunched over L pose that you so often see him in, kind of curled up into a ball almost. And I went ahead and put in a guideline here for the collar of his shirt. And basically, yeah, if you're trying to replicate this pose, you're going to want to pay attention to where this line curves into this square. I mean, he's really going to be shifted over here. We're not going to use so much of this side of the box, but I like to begin with a square since it's such a easily replicatable shape. So anyway, let's move on to drawing. Well, I'll get the hands and maybe the forearms in place. Alright, so you can see I'm not getting into the details of the hands here. They sort of look more like mittens or paws or something, but just getting some basic guidelines in here for the shape. His fingers are going to be curling over his knees with both of the legs coming down here eventually. But again, if you are trying to replicate this pose exactly, notice how this hand, the fingers are coming across that central line that we put down. This one not quite touching that line. Well, let's go ahead and maybe just finish it off. I'm going to draw the legs and the feet. So there we have the last of the lines. Notice again that the feet, like this one foot, is touching that bottom line, this one not quite, pointing in 2 different directions, which actually is nice for all manner of poses. When the feet point in slightly different directions like that, tends to look more natural than if they're pointing in exactly the same direction. I'm almost done with the guidelines. I'm going to refocus the camera so we can get a little closer in on the face. So you can see I've placed really just the 3 or I guess 4 different facial features here, the irises of each eye, and notice the blank space there, how it's actually a little closer to the side of the head than it is to that central line. And then the nose and the mouth, and as so often the case when you're going for accurate anatomy, the mouth tends to be a little closer to the nose than it is to the chin. Well, I'm going to knock it off with all the time lapse. Do you know, I always say knock it off with the time lapse. Have you noticed that? It's like one of those angry old guys. Hey, you kids! Knock it off with all the time lapse down there! In any case, I'm erasing away these guidelines, which might make you think, what was the point of drawing the guidelines if you're just going to erase them? Well, I'm going to leave them a little faintly here. You can see how the central line helped me for getting the nose and the mouth in the right place, getting them to sort of line up. Happens a lot, actually, in a 3/4 point of view, that there a certain relationship develops between they're having a relationship, people, between the placement of this far away eye, the nose, and the mouth. So that's something you can pay attention to, not just for drawing L, but drawing 3/4 views of the face in general. Anyway, I'm going to leave this faintly because the top and bottom line for the eye will indeed help me as I go in now to begin drawing the upper and lower eyelids for L's eyes. And so I'm going to come in here, and he does sort of have unusually shaped eyes, I think, compared to a lot of manga characters, very sort of almond-shaped eyes. Certainly, you know, a one-of-a-kind character in so many different ways. I think one of the all-time great characters ever created. And I don't mean just in the manga world, I think in storytelling of all types. So you can see me putting in the, they end up sort of almond-shaped. I'm going to come down here, and he gets the bags under his eyes. Lack of sleep. But that lower eyelid line does in fact line up with that earlier line that I had put in. And I believe these two lines do tend to connect over here on the far edge, but I may be, you know, obscuring that a little bit with the hair later on. And of course the hair is a big part of the L design, the look of L. I have to be careful with not going too dark on these lines. I make it look like he's wearing mascara or something, but there is a sort of a certain darkness and thickness to these lines. You have to sort of strike a balance. In any case, getting this line into place, I can begin to refine. And certainly this area over here, I'm not going to bother to draw it because I'm planning on having hair come in front of that later on. What are you going to draw, Krilly? And I guess I'll go ahead and do the sort of dilated pupils that we often see, leaving a highlight here. But this area in here is going to get darkened in. And we're going to leave the edge a little lighter, although his eyes do look pretty, you know, dark and black. And for the nose, you know, I had just put in one line, but actually the drawing style, like I said, you know, tip of the hat, or thanks for the entire existence of this video to Takeshi Obata, who, you know, designed this character, tends to draw characters more anatomically accurate than you see in a lot of manga styles, and so that means that you are delineating the nose a little more, getting a line for the nostril in there. And I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of the sort of curve of the lips here. I'm going to have to erase to get that more accurate. There we go. And I think he does generally tend to also draw a line for the lower lip, which is, again, something that you don't always see in manga illustrations. And I'm going to sort of refine this shape so that we have maybe a little curve to the chin rather than it coming to a point. And then maybe come up here and give some suggestion of the cheekbone as it heads up here. And we reach the area of the hair. And speaking of which, it's time to get into that. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing L's hair. And there's a sort of a system to it. I don't think it's exactly the same every time you see, but certainly there is one big pointing strand of hair that comes down here between the eyes. The whole structure of the hair seems to be based on the idea of a loose part that's happening over here somewhere. And as a result, you get a lot of curving lines coming across. So anyway, if you want to try to replicate this, get one strand that's coming down between the eyes, and then you get another much longer strand that's cutting right across here, all the way past the side of the head. And you're going to end up with several strands that sort of work together here on this side. They're working together. Come on, strands, let's work together. So I'm going to split this into about 3. And this is where I think, you know, even Obata would not be like trying to get it exactly the same every single time. I mean, whose hair is exactly the same every single time? Unless he's using really good mousse or something. Yeah, I got the basics of that in place. I guess I want to start to talk about how the final contour of the hair goes well beyond his the line here of the top of his scalp. Let's come over here, and I'm going to begin to talk about this this loose part. You certainly don't see a line for like the part in his hair, but you do have a sense that it starts over here on the left And then everything else is kind of responding to that. And flowing away from, say like this point right here in a way. You treat that as your decisive point, and everything else starts to flow away. Most of the lines are curving in a similar direction. I think every once in a while you might get a stray strand that goes in the opposite direction. See how this is curving that way? Maybe get another little strand down here. Why not? Let's be generous with our strands. Enough of this stinginess. And then, so you can see this really is, compared to the initial line of the scalp, really quite full-bodied. He's got very full-bodied hair. Al is the envy of people everywhere. Man, if only I had hair like Al. You can see, actually, people with hair like Al at pretty much any anime convention you go to. You see some kind of amazing cosplay of people dressed up as Al. Krilly, you're not even talking about how to draw anymore. You're talking about conventions. I don't know. I sort of committed to the idea of trying to do this central part of the video real time, and you know how it is, folks. I sometimes run out of things to say. But I guess now that I think about it, most of these strands coming down, sort of curving down, but then there's a whole little section over here where they are curving up. So I guess I was wrong. That thing I said earlier, please ignore it. It was completely wrong in every way. And then over here, even I get a little confused about the structure, but I think you've got a lot of hair strands that are heading off in a somewhat horizontal direction. And then over here, right next to the eye, maybe, is where you have several, almost looks like a claw, like a raven's claw or something coming down here, kind of fanning out a little bit, but, pointing in a noticeably different direction than those other hairs did. And back here somewhere, buried beneath it all, is an indication of his ear, which I probably should have put in at the start. But I'm going to leave the hair for now. I think we've spent more than enough time on it. Let's move on to drawing. Well, I'm going to double up the line here of the collar of his shirt, which is something I saw in at least some of the illustrations. I think it is part of his shirt, but you can always see this sort of hem. Is that what that's called? And then here, from this point of view, we can see an indication of his collarbone, and then maybe just one line here for his neck, coming up to the head, and as he's sort of leaning forward. And there probably would be other lines for the neck back there, but it's all obscured by his hair. And let's see. Excuse me, I do have a little bit of a cough this morning, so my apologies if my voice is a little rougher than usual. Let's come across here and start to draw his fingers. Hands are, of course, notoriously difficult to draw, and I struggle with them just like anyone else does. Happily, in this pose that we often see L in, the fingers do sort of line up. He's not like doing any strange gesture or anything. He's just sort of clasping his own knees with his hands. And notice how the longest finger is the sort of central one. These two fingers are a little shorter. I don't know how clear this is, but this should always be the longest of the fingers. And of his wardrobe, and it's just the exact same pair of pants and white shirt over and over again. Well, you know what we can do over here as we move into the rest of the video is start to talk about clothing wrinkles. I'm going to refocus the camera so that we can see more of the not just his shoulder and arms, but maybe also the pants, and we'll just devote a lot of the remaining part of this video to talking about wrinkles in general. So yeah, I think this is a good way of expanding the topic of this video a little bit.